Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon, fellow Zimbabweans. I'm coming to you at a point in time when we are facing very perilous moments, difficult times, and a very deep crisis in our country and indeed in the world. But I must say that before I go into the reason for this press briefing, which is a unique press briefing in the sense that we are not using the traditional methods of press conferencing, but we are doing it in a very unique way. This is why we've done it online, and we've asked our fellow journalists, members of the press, to ask questions if they have any. I'm glad that the team, our media team, has already sent them the link and the necessary numbers that they're supposed to use to ask any questions if they need any clarification. This press briefing, as I have indicated, is very unique. A unique one in the sense that it's coming at a time when we are supposed to look at this crisis we are facing in a very, very challenging manner, in a difficult manner. I must say that what has necessitated this press conference or press briefing is the need to give alternative COVID response narrative in very pointed form, the points that we feel are supposed to be given due consideration. It has been our wish that we would have a united approach as citizens to this pandemic, without being partisan, without being political, because this is not the Met season of our usual politics. It is a season for us to unite and to work together to focus on this pandemic, defeat it, and then look at any other challenges that we have in the country. But before I also go any further, allow me to observe a minute of silence.
I can learn to understand
and also
much better.
A minute of prayer, particularly remembering Zimbabweans who have perished in the country. We've recorded 3 so far. We acknowledge them. We also remember the families. But we also want to remember Zimbabweans in the diaspora, and indeed all the nations and the citizens of the world who have had to endure this pandemic. Those who have passed on, we take a minute of silence, and of course a minute of deep prayer. Thank you. As I indicated, this is a very important press briefing. We are going to look at a number of issues, mainly what we believe must be done by the government, by the people of Zimbabwe, by the private sector, by the churches, by the civil society, by labor, and by all the other actors in the country. As I have already indicated, ladies and gentlemen, fellow countrymen, we are in difficult times, in moments of a deep crisis, and this crisis, like no other, there is a substantial uncertainty. There is a danger that we are going to slide into the unknown. We have all seen how this pandemic has hit us. Parliaments have had to close down. Factories have had to shut down. Presidents have had to sit and cease to exercise their jurisdiction in a certain manner. For a moment, we now have discovered that we are all under one president, the presiding authority in the country, the God of our universe, the God Almighty. For a moment, we've seen that our nationalities do not matter, our races do not matter, our tribes do not matter. What matters is the important thing that's key to our survival, that's life. We've seen that wealth has meant nothing. The rich and the poor have been united. We've seen that divisions do not matter. I've seen that even in areas where there are hostilities, they've had to cease those hostilities to focus on fighting the common enemy, the invisible enemy, called COVID-19. This has imposed an unnecessarily huge impact on the lives and livelihoods of the people of the world. We can see that it's very difficult to predict the future, particularly in the context of a lot that is depending on the epidemiology of the virus, the effectiveness of the containment measures, the development of therapeutic and vaccines that are supposed to be put in place. All are hard to predict because it's a disease that is coming on the face of the earth for the first time. Our country faces multiple crises: the health crisis, the financial crisis, and of course our deep perennial crisis, which is our poverty crisis. These interact in a very complex way, pretending to be in dimensions that we have not understood before, but presenting us with unprecedented challenges, especially at household level, in our companies, in our firms, financial markets, and even in terms of our supply chains as we knew them. They've all been disrupted. The Covid19 pandemic is causing more than just a medical problem across the whole world. The pathogen has wrought a staggering death toll that we have seen. The death tolls we have seen across the various nations of our country are just scary. We have seen this in Spain, in Italy, in the United States of America, in the United Kingdom, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe. We have seen the dangers that are being presented by this wrecking menace that has wrecked livelihoods in a very big way. Economies across the world are under severe strain. Supply chains have been radically disrupted. Tourism and air travel is paralyzed. Currency markets are all at an all-time low. We have seen the drop in the predictions that have been made, particularly from the Zimbabwe Tourism Authority, even from the Chamber of Mines, from the commerce sector, particularly the Confederation of the Zimbabwe Industries. We have seen that there are huge indications of the problems that we continue to face. We continue to face unprecedented supply and demand shocks. We continue to see the global economy itself tanking and stalling. The economy as we knew it is gone. We are now in the era of the new. The game has completely changed. The game plan has to change. Our manufacturers, small to medium enterprises continue to face the prospect of not reopening, and even after the reopening or lifting up of borders and lockdowns, unless we too have some very serious bailouts that are going to help us. In the context of Zimbabwe, we are now faced with two impossible choices. The choice of death by hunger, the slow shutdowns that are taking place, but also the death that can be visited upon us on account of this disease, as an insurgent pathogen continues to indiscriminately sweep across the continents of this world. There is considerable uncertainty about what the economic landscape will look like as we emerge from the lockdowns. That is, if we manage to emerge from these lockdowns. Under the assumption that the pandemic and the required containment peaks in the second quarter of this pandemic in the world recede, we are likely to see what has already been projected by the World Economic Outlook of the IMF, that we're going to have a global growth in 2020 to fall by a -3%. This downgrade of about 6.3 percentage points from January 2020 is a major revision in a short space of time, indicating the calamity that we are facing. This makes this great lockdown the Great Depression, the worst recession since the Great Depression that we saw in the 1920s, and is a far worse recession compared to the global financial crisis that we had recently. Assuming that the pandemic fades away in the part of the year, in the second half of 2020, the policy actions that are being taken have to be so effective, accurate, in order for us to terminate job losses, widespread financial strains, and of course stop the global downturn in terms of our rebounding going forward. What is hitting us is enormous, fellow countrymen. It is the mother of all wars, and we cannot continue with the business as usual approach. It's a business unusual moment. The government has to pursue a path that saves lives, protects livelihoods, preventing our economy from collapsing and saving our economy during this trying moment. On top of borrowing our global best practices and experience, the best scientific evidence available, The government has to craft a uniquely Zimbabwean response that is customized and tailored in circumstances of our situation, looking at our competencies, our incapabilities and capabilities as a great nation. We are able to defeat this pandemic only if we unite, only if we focus, and only if we are able to get the best ideas from the best men among us. The citizens must also be clear as we go into this, to make sure that as we go beyond the 21st day of the lockdown, what is it that we're expecting as an end result? What is going to be the next step? What are we expected to do as citizens? What are the leaders expected to do at various levels? And what are we not expected to do? This clarity has not been shared quite clearly, and this is what we want to be dealt with immediate effect. We are proposing the following, and in the immediate. There are three broad areas that we think need greater clarity. First is combating the pandemic itself. Second are the measures that are going to cushion families and citizens, including businesses, from the effects of the lockdown. Third is the issue of planning ahead in the reopening of the economy, with particular emphasis on preventing business closures, company bankruptcy, loss of jobs, and the re-empowering of our informal sectors. As you know, in Zimbabwe, we primarily depend on a hand-to-mouth basis. And for that reason, we need also to change with the change in work styles, the change in lifestyles, what we have to do in order for us to develop that which has not been developed. This is the advent of the fourth industrial revolution across the whole world. Even for those who are lagging behind, we are in the fourth industrial revolution era. We need to change the way we've been doing things. Work styles have to change, lifestyles have to change, play styles have to change. So it means that we need to embrace technologies in a more advanced way, but advanced way in such a way that we do not tear apart our fabric as a people and as a nation. What are we suggesting in terms of cushioning and making sure that we combat the pandemic? The first thing we are suggesting and proposing is to make sure that we have a whole strategy involving all citizens. That is the labor, academics, our churches, particularly our churches, because they are the soul of the nation. They are the faith guardians of our country. And they are the juror and the borders, the boundary defenders when it comes to spiritual matters, but also matters of keeping the soul of the nation safeguarded. So we need to engage the church, political players in their various assortments. We need the private sector to be all involved, both at the craft competence level, craft literacy level, the consummation and conceiving or conception of the planning of programs and also implementation of programs. We need a united team approach. This is no time for divisive silo mentality. This is time for us to be organic, dynamic, united, focused, and to be able to have a Team Zimbabwe approach. This Team Zimbabwe approach is only possible if we are able to bury in the sand arrogance, bury in the sand our ignorance on account of not knowing the real effects of this pandemic. We are insisting and emphasizing that we must have programs to cushion exposed citizens and communicate a clear strategy behind not just the lockdown, but even beyond, elaborating the measures that, as government, we are taking to contain the spreading of the virus. We are also urging the increasing of testing, rolling out a nationwide testing program, as we have seen in South Africa, as we have seen in the United States of America, and other jurisdictions like Rwanda, where they've done so well in everyday testing, situation reporting, reporting accurate figures, so that people are not left in the zone of conjecture, in the zone of guesswork. We need people to have a proper and better reporting that is key to assuring the nation in these circumstances of a lot of uncertainty. The key task of government is to detect, test, track, isolate, and treat and contain the disease, contain the virus. But we must be able to come up with a clear isolation plan, a clear treatment plan, which is elaborate for every person, in the rural areas and of course in the urban areas. We need a transparent testing program so that the nation has accurate official figures, not having these Nicodemus testing for the big guns, the short collars, and big bowlers, the big wigs. Those structures do not help us. We need structures that are available to all and for all. We need an agent mass testing program and mechanism that will center on accessibility by all in the neighborhoods, particularly having polyclinics and also specialized facilities. In this, we are also urging the avoidance of the temptation to make sure that we don't use the traditional referral hospitals or clinics, polyclinics, for this virus, because that will then put into jeopardy other patients who are supposed to be isolated for other diseases. We are also urging government to develop an information toolkit for the citizens to make sure that they can view and create an awareness on the progress being made towards combating the virus. This toolkit must be disseminated through various media channels and platforms, and this toolkit must give specific details of the number of people tested per day, per hour, accurate statistical figures on the outcomes of the tests, and of course with the hope that this information can provide evidence to show how the country is managing to cope and combat the disease. We must also make sure that this is an important emphasis, particularly from an information coordination point of view, cushioning our people against the unintended consequences of this disease. I'm sure you have all seen cases of our fellow Zimbabweans queuing for mealie meal and other basic commodities. These are the issues that we must be dealing with, as I will articulate in a short space of time. We need to make sure that we cushion our citizens and businesses from distress and speed up the rolling out of a humanitarian support program, a social protective net being put in place, a clear statement on what must be done and what must be put as a benefit to those who have been affected. We need to get food and monetary assistance without politicizing the humanitarian support in food. I've heard of cases where certain in our political circles have had to use this as an opportunity to try and advance their political fortunes using food as a political weapon. We cannot afford to have the weaponization of food in our context, the weaponization of humanitarian aid in this crisis. We need food for all. No part card in access to the food. We are Zimbabwean. We are God's children, and we have to be fed by a government that is charged with that task. Those who are positive after being tested on account of the tests that are taking place must also get some financial support, at least for a month, so that they can fight the disease and manage the circumstances. Deceased families need government relief through a government relief fund for the beneficiaries, so that we're able to create a social safety net. I know some will say, but where is the money going to be coming from? I say, indeed, this is now the time for the surplus that government has made on account of the 2% levy to be used to cushion not just the victims, but also the workers who are facing very hard times. I was reading of a situation in Denmark, the finance minister there indicating that they've paid 90% of the salaries of those who were affected by this lockdown. That is the direction we must take. We also need a new method of providing water, food, and mealie meal. This is our opportunity to change the way we've been doing things. On our part, we've already indicated to those who are supposed to be dealing with water at local authority level to do what has to be done. We've already instructed mayors, councillors, local authorities to do everything in their power to avail water. We call upon central government to reciprocate the efforts that we have made by providing the necessary resources, particularly the forex, to realize this important basic necessity so that water is available in the various communities, at least via taps, pipe water, but if it is not possible, bowsers and other such mechanisms to make sure that water is available. We are also urging government to immediately intervene and reduce the price of fuel, the price of electricity by offering a subsidy, particularly in this situation, just for the period of fighting the virus. The same has to be done in reducing the internet tariffs and price of data, because the internet has become a very important platform for the dissemination of information, and as such, we must be able to look at this with the necessary support that has to be given to such. We also need to create a new model for the informal sector. Gone are the days when we would just have the Mbari Seeker as the only point where we would have our produce being sold. We need to have a new market system to decongest and decentralize the hitherto programs that have been used and mechanisms that have been implemented. So we need this as a chance to offer new models for distributing our produce into various communities, in the high-density suburbs, in the countryside, in the various areas. In this context, we also have, as you know, 5.7 million people who are in the informal sector. It is important for us to be very clear on their support mechanisms, because we are living on hand-to-mouth. Locking down is not a viable and sustainable approach. People are starving, people are suffering. But we need to balance this with the necessity to make sure that we also ward off the effects of the pandemic. We need for students and school pupils who are at school, provide radio and TV lessons, dedicated channels for education, particularly in this period. Online methods have also to be utilized so that we don't lose in terms of time. I know that some have said we cannot be having the luxury of thinking about study under these circumstances, but we must always think about the day after, the day tomorrow. We must also emphasize, and I'm so happy that the High Court issued a very important order with respect to human rights, particularly of our doctors and also our workers who are working for government and who are doing a lot of things. I must take this opportunity also to salute, thank, and honor those who have been at the front line, our doctors, our nurses, our health professionals, janitors, but also even our police, those who are doing their work properly, and our security forces. I've seen cases of certain of those being claimed or alleged to be security officers being involved in some beating of ordinary citizens. That is unacceptable, and that must be condemned. And those who are perpetrators in this must be brought to book. We need to make sure that fundamental freedoms are respected, the security of persons is respected, the dignity of all citizens must be respected. And also I've received reports of increased domestic violence cases that are occurring on account of people spending more time. As you know, familiarity breeds contempt. I don't know why familiarity in the context of family settings is bringing this kind of content. We must discourage it, but also encourage people to enjoy the family setup, the family circumstances, and the conditions of love within our family setups. We are urging government to make sure that with immediate effect, there is a provision for personal protective equipment for our nurses, our doctors, our administrative support staff, our police and security services officers, and also our state employees who are already at the front line. Risk allowance must be provided. Tax exemption for all our health professionals must be exempted. Our security servicemen and government workers on duty and on the front line must also be supported. Government must provide specialized support to the elderly, providing sanitizers and masks for all, as we have seen in other jurisdictions. Transparency and accountability in the handling of COVID issues is a necessity and a must. We've seen examples in Guinea where we've seen that there has been no payment of rent by workers and citizens, particularly in the context of our situation up to December in 2020. Government is pledged to cover electricity and water for 3 months. Free public transport for 3 months, that's in Guinea. In Ghana, we've seen water bills being covered for 3 months. We've seen also workers being exempted from paying tax for the next 3 months. We cannot be in a business as usual mode. Rwanda, we saw door-to-door food deliveries to the disadvantaged groups, provision of water and electricity, and more importantly, provision of free hospital access. In Botswana, just next door, we saw 168 million to assist business in order to pay the workers that have been affected. In Uganda, President Museveni has done something in terms of the rent that has not been paid. Of course, on the extreme, he has said that until further notice. But distribution of food to vulnerable groups is such an important element that we must embark on. This is where our churches come in, this is where government comes in, but this is also where the Team Zimbabwe comes in, our private sector, political players coordinating and making sure that we have a coordinated approach. African governments have remarkably shown good leadership. We must not be left behind in Zimbabwe. We must continue to show that we are capable and we are able, and we must do the same, but in a better fashion. What is our clear strategy going forward on how the economy will be rescued? That's the last element. We are urging government to make sure that we are already preparing for a back-to-life program so that we are able to bring people back to life, back to work, back to our normal being, our normal family setups without social distancing, without having to do some of these things that we are continuing to do. This back to normal life roadmap, a reconstruction and recovery program, must be a shared program by all the stakeholders so that there is adequate consultation, there is adequate cross-pollination of ideas and strategies. We are ready to offer ourselves in this regard. Creation of an enabling environment is very important, particularly going into full dollarization, removing forex retention and aid growth for exporting companies, particularly in the context of our businesses. There are unnecessary and excessive taxes that have to be removed. In the tourism sector, there are about 22 tax heads, while in mining, we almost have about 15 tax heads, some of which are unnecessary. This will give room for oxygen in the economy, particularly by our business as they recover. We need tax incentives, such as corporate tax waiver, for companies supporting local production and import substitution. A stimulus package of about 5 billion needs to be mobilized that will form the rescue package, since most of our companies are likely to fail in reopening. In fact, even before we went for this lockdown, most companies were already struggling in terms of coping with the situation. We need to embrace the fourth industrial revolution, as I have already indicated. We need to make sure that we do what has to be done to move forward. As I say this and as I conclude, we face a monumental national crisis, a proportional challenge that is beyond what we have ever imagined, a national challenge that requires a national response. National problems require a national team approach. We cannot afford to have a partisan approach. We cannot afford to do point scoring or looking at the scoreboard in terms of political points. There are no points to be scored. There is no political scoreboard. There is only Zimbabwe to save and our lives to save. Considering the diverse and multiple skills that we have, particularly in our organization, the MDC Alliance, we are ready because we've had ministers in government, former ministers, we have engineers, we have lawyers, we have economists, we have researchers and experts in the various areas of necessity and need. We are ready to assist. We don't want polarization in the context of the pandemic. We have chosen to put politics aside and we want to assist government to craft those measures. Then we can deal with our legitimate issues soon after defeating the virus that is affecting all of us. The diverse skills we have in our organization are so tremendous that they can actually assist the nation at this critical time. We are ready to assist, we are ready to help, we are ready to cooperate, we are ready to do our bit without pointing fingers. And this is why in this statement, the emphasis is not to blame, but to make sure that we are able to up the game together and move forward. This is particularly important, particularly when we realize that whenever we are united, we've never been defeated. During the liberation struggle, we united under the liberation consensus. We won, hands down. We can do the same in fighting this pandemic and beyond in the transformation consensus to rebuild our country. Let us conclude by urging ministers and those in parliament, councillors, to take the lead in their various communities, constituencies, especially even in offering a salary cut to show that we are serious about this. We cannot just be participating without being involved. When we are participating, we are giving something. But when we are involved, we are giving our all. And that is leadership that is required. This is no time for politics. Life is too precious to be a political game. We must preserve it. We must defeat this coronavirus, this COVID-19. We will overcome it. We shall triumph. God is on our side. God is in it. God bless you. Thank you, Zimbabwe.